Thank you all for staying and for joining us for this discussion. As you can see, we have the star of the movie with us. Unfortunately, one of our Columbia faculty panelists is unable to join us, but we have at least as good a panel as a result of that. So let me just introduce Hamid Dabashi, whom I actually have notes about, in case any of you don't know him. Professor of Middle East Studies, Comparative Literature and Film Studies. He served as a jury member on many international art film festivals and a major figure in advancing transnational art and independent world cinema. Gigi, you've met. Baha, you've met. So I won't introduce them any further. But let me actually start with a question to you, Hamid. I've seen you comment on Battle of Algiers. I've heard you think through the relationship between sort of politics and art and film particularly. Sort of frame that for us in a couple of minutes.
First of all, thank you, Lisa, for having me. Lisa Anderson is still Dean Anderson to us, especially when we come to this building. And as soon as she says jump, I just say hi. I jump. She's an extraordinary, visionary academic leader that we were blessed to have her. And then in a crucial moment, she went to Cairo and led American University in Cairo in equally important and traumatic period. So it's a pleasure and honor to be with Lisa. Now, I had the privilege of watching Jihan's film a couple of nights ago. And it is an absolutely masterful crafting of a daughter's love letter to her father, first and foremost. Daughters looking for their father is, especially in political circumstances, is ordinary. But the key issue in this particular story is the role of the mother, and particularly her art. So what we're watching is actually multiple layers. Is the story of her mom. Jihan actually discovers her mom as she's looking for her dad. And then through it, despite the fact that there are many aspects to this documentary, we also have a glimpse of a love story between a Syrian lady and a Libyan gentleman. And the way that Jihan's mother talks about her homeland and her husband and her responsibility, and especially that wonderful scene in which he is trying to woo her and seduce her, and says, well, already you're number 3. And then say, what about if we have a child? Well, we'll go one grade down. So there is a humor and humanity to the film that frames Jihan's search for her father. But the search is not just individual, a daughter looking for her dad. Soon the search is also for her homeland, namely it's for Libya. And here, as somebody who has lived in this country for many years and have seen how these stories are abused in order to demonize a people, a nation, a country, I tip my hat multiple times to Jihan for the subtlety and precision with which she tells us the story of her search for her dad. The film is also very suspenseful. Hitchcock famously said, suspense is not that you don't know what's going to happen. Suspense is when you know a bomb is going to blow up or somebody is going to be killed. But the suspense is you don't know when it's going to happen. 5 minutes into the film, you know that here is a young woman looking for her dad, but you don't know how and when and what the circumstances are. That's what gives the film its power. But ultimately, in addition to be a love letter to a lost father, this is also an act of mourning for a father that Jihan didn't have a chance to mourn. A famous essay of Freud makes a distinction between mourning and melancholy. Mourning is for a loved person that you know what it is. It's done consciously. You have lost a loved one and you mourn. But melancholy is subconscious. You don't know what it is that you are mourning. This is, to me, Lisa, is this single most important political aspect. As I was telling Jihan when we were waiting, Jihan is Libya. Her mom is Libya. Their love for their father, the love for their homeland, the cosmopolitan disposition of their characters, the fact that they carry Syria in them, they carry Europe in them, they carry United States in them. That multiplicity, that cosmopolitan character of a Libya, which is systematically and consistently erased as soon as it is reduced to the figure of just one figurehead, to me is the political significance of the film, is beautifully done, and I very much hope that Jihan will have a chance to share it with larger audiences.
Thank you. I think one of the things that all of us appreciate is this sort of multi-vocal version of both a family story and a, if you will, a political story. Jihan, you have said, and I'm quoting you, that you hope that this film reaches as many people in the world as possible, and that if someone is not familiar with Libya and Gaddafi, they will have a story that they connect with through empathy. Libya can become more humanized and unslowly tangle itself from the monopoly of terror of Gaddafi and the Gaddafi era. That would be a great gift for my father because he loved his country. I completely agree with that. I think one of the brilliant things about the film is that it makes Libya accessible in ways that for many people it hasn't been. Can you tell us a little bit about the reception? It's won awards, it's been shown in lots of places. Tell us how it's being received.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is really an honor. Any excuse to be back in the university building makes me very, very happy. So, and I also want to thank my wonderful cousin. I put a little bit of context. We haven't seen each other since 2019. And I was making my film, so that footage that you saw, some of the footage that you saw with my family, she was right there alongside me, helping me. And it is true that she did hold the camera during the funeral. That was actually Tiha. And that's the beauty of documentary. You do have to stitch things together because you can't be everywhere at the same time. So I do want to honor my cousin also. And it's just an incredible series of events and miracle. I think that somehow she's ended up in this university, and I've also ended up finishing my film, and we're here. So thank you to Columbia University and to the faculty for bringing us back together. As far as the reception of the film, it world premiered in Venice last year, August 2025, and it actually had a very strong reception in Italy. And that was because of the historical thread related to Mussolini in Italy in the colonization period, which I think is, the timing just happens to be perfect, that it seems to me that the Italian people are more open to discussing and wanting to reckon with their own history, because they've kind of slid into the shadows with, kind of this I think, hyper-focusing on Hitler also created a shadow space for other authoritarian leaders at the time to very conveniently hide behind. Their legacy's also been hidden in those shadows, and Mussolini's definitely one of them, because he's never been under the same level of microscope that Hitler or his other counterparts have. And Libya's history, as a result, had got lost in that as well. So what's quite, I would say, poetic, beautiful, healing has been, and symbolic, I would say, is that, 100 years later on Italian soil in Venice, in the same buildings that were actually built at the same period as Mussolini's time, a Libyan woman is projecting a story about Libya and projecting the atrocities of Italian colonization on their own land. But it was received very gracefully. And the public, I've noticed, is in the audience was very thirsty to discuss. So yeah, it's toured around the world now, and it's still going. And yes, it is my dream to share it with everybody. I'm not just focusing on festivals. For me, I've been in people's living rooms. I've invited people to my home. Anyone who wants to see it, I want to share it with them.
And it's going to be in New York?
Yes, yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Do your PR
New York,
here.
No, I'm not very good at that. New York African Film Festival. The New York premiere is going to be May 7th at the Lincoln Center. There's also a smaller festival called Red Hook in Brooklyn. That's going to be May 17th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so that will be the next screenings in New York City. My mother and I will be attending the Lincoln Center screening, also with the Q&A with the public.
So tell me about how you think about this film. This is your daughter's production. It's about your husband. How does it feel to have all of that, the personal part of your life revealed?
Well, I think she present Gigi my life within 1 hour, and it's been like almost 30 years. So 30 years from, I don't want to call it a struggle. It was like a duty for every human being, every mother should go through this in a different way. Mine was in a different situation, which is, I was telling the gentleman over here,
Hamid.
I was single mother twice in my life. The first time when I was married, I have 2 children. Then I got married to Mansur, and he was number 3 and 4. So then he left. So I was with these 4 children. And it was pleasure for me when I saw myself that strong. Being strong is very simple. Not strong with muscles, strong here. Strong with my beliefs that it's my duty as a human being. I was in this, God gave me this life, not for me to give others, I was lucky to have the chance to do it. And I think I did well. What do you think? Here I have to mention Katie London. She was with us in this house, the one you saw. She was babysitting for Gigi. And she was living with me for a while. Her father and her mom helped me when the incident came. They were the only people in Paris to stand by me 100%. He said, don't worry, and they came from Paris. I live outside Paris. And he wrote a letter. Your father, his name Lance London. He wrote a letter to Clinton, President Clinton. In 2 days, I received the answer through the American embassy in Paris that, don't worry, Mrs. Kikhia, we will bring your husband back safe. Because to him, I was American citizen. Mansur, he wasn't. So it was very important to mention my second family who stood by me more than anybody else. They helped me. God bless his soul. And your mom, Adrienne, say hello to her. So what else
That's fine. I actually want each of you perhaps to speculate on another question that Jihan has been quoted as proposing. You have said that you think the film raises important questions. What does it mean to be Libyan? Without Gaddafi, without politics, without fear. And maybe, Hamid, I think that I would love to hear each of you sort of think about that question aloud.
So I remember, yes, it was, and I do think that the film in some ways was a political act in the sense that I can rationalize, not justify, but I can rationalize how human beings eliminate opponents. And we don't have to go into the grand spectacle of politics to analyze that. You can just look inside your home, look at your own behavior, and look at your personal life. It's not that far-reaching to imagine why there's rivalries and why people start to oppose and fight. But, so in the grand scale, I can rationalize the situation with my father and Qaddafi with some sort of distance. And that's because of the privilege of the distance of my generation, and also actually conveniently trauma. It can make you a little bit numb and constantly feeling this feeling of when you're looking up, down, what's that feeling? Disassociation. There was another word that I forgot. But what I can't rationalize or justify is that Qaddafi would steal my identity, my past, my understanding of my own family and my history, or my future. That becomes then my responsibility. So this film was a vessel to exercise and empower myself. A lot of people ask me if I've had closure or healing. I would say I think that door will always be open, because trauma is permanent, and the surreal feeling of constant shock, that will always be there. And I'm almost at peace with it. It's a part of who I am. But being Libyan, I had a direct reckoning with it. As a woman, I'm young, I was young then, and there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot to unpack. And it can be really, really intimidating, very scary. Besides the politics, Libya is a very tribal society. Tribal society can be very inclusive, but also very harsh. So if you stand outside, there's no really way back in. And I have two very short anecdotes to answer this question also. I interviewed over 60 people, most of them Libyan men. Many of them passed away. I literally was interviewing a generation that was passing away. My father would have been 95 years old now if he was alive. But one of them is an older, kind of what would be patriarchal man at the top. And he spent so many hours with me and was so generous and gracious with me. But at the end, he looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Gigi, don't worry. I'm Libyan. My mother's Libyan. My father's Libyan. I was born in Libya. I speak the language. I'm from the culture. And even I don't know what it means to be Libyan." And so I felt this huge weight lifted, because I've always been a bit scrambled in my head about being half and mixed and ostracized and in and out and what is it. And then there was another story where I spent lots of time, again, with these Libyan men, a lot of like kind of pseudo male father figures there. I was trying to grab a little piece of everyone to create kind of this portrait of my father. And there was one family who welcomed me, and I spent a lot of time with them. His children were my age, around my age, and actually we had very similar profiles. They're half Libyan, their father's Libyan in the opposition, grew up in London, their mother's South African. I'm Libyan, opposition, my mom is Syrian, but I grew up in Paris in Europe. And his daughter was like glued to me as I was just really engaging with her father. And she later told me, I've never thought to ask my father all these questions. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's because your father's alive. I'm really taking advantage of anyone who's alive right now. And I asked him in front of his children, I said, if you remove politics and you remove religion, what does it mean to be Libyan? And we were all waiting, expecting some long answer. And he didn't even waste a second. And he goes, nothing. And then we were like, what? I said, yeah, but what are you passing? If they're not South African, what makes them Libyan? If it's not the opposition, not religion, nothing. I don't know, I'm not saying any of their answers are true. I'm just sharing with you that this loss, it's all of us are sharing this loss of this identity. And it's just different flavors of it.
Yeah, I actually, before I go to you, Hamid, to think that through that question, I have often reflected on, and it's in the film and it's about the Italian period, the extent to which an entire culture and sense of self and sense of national identity and so forth and so on was obliterated, so that by the time you get to the end of when you get to even formal independence, there are no high schools, there's no universities, there's no that whole generation of intellectual elite was disappeared. So that answer is, in a way, a reflection of that history, among other things. But Hamid, go.
It's impossible to exaggerate the luxury, peace of mind that you have to sit for an hour and a half to watch a documentary so beautifully crafted about an aspect of Libyan history, because we have dreadfully short attention span because of this dreadful machine that we're trying to chase after. Until a couple of days ago was Gaza, then was Lebanon, then is Iran, and before Iran is... so we try to chase after the news, and as a result, we don't have the patience, the perseverance, the grace to sit down and actually watch a Libyan, half Syrians, to tell a story about Libya. And fortunately, right now, Libya is not in the news. I remember vividly, a reporter called me, Lisa, when Libya was in the news during the President Obama, asking me, President Obama, I mean, it's sort of faking a story. President Obama is on the line. Should you assist bombing Libya or not bombing Libya? I said, excuse me. When Obama was selling guns and ammunition and tanks to Libya, did they ask my opinion about this? At the time, a group of European professors had gone to Libya and said, Libya is the Norway of North Africa. I said, have you seen my name among those professors? No. I'm standing outside. If Obama attacks, I call him an imperialist. If he doesn't, and Qaddafi does a massacre, I hold those who gave him gun responsible for that massacre. We cannot be put in that position. The fortunate thing right now is that we are in the capable hands of a gifted filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, has spent 5, 6, 7 years, I don't know, 9 years, crafting together documentary material and carefully sifting them through, and us get together in an evening here at Columbia and watch and think. Because this is where the interiority of our humanity comes out. Because come tomorrow morning, if you're like me, you get up 3 o'clock in the morning and start chasing after the news and one tweet and one this, you forget that you're a human being and you become a machine. This is what accounts for our humanity. Sit in front of a humanist who is chasing, looking, searching for her father, but through her father also we discover her mother, and through them we discover her siblings. The beautiful song at the very end when the credits roll is actually Jihan's sister. That is when you get to know a people. That is when you get to know the history. Victoria Di Grazia, my distinguished colleague who has worked on Italian history and European history, is sitting right here. I feel at home with Lisa on one side and Vicky on the other side. We are privileged to have these spaces for us to think and sit at the foot of people. I mean, I had the privilege of sitting down and talking to Baha when we were in the other room. I hope Jihan's next project is her mom, because she is one extraordinary woman, artist. Not just her art, her family, her story that when she met Qaddafi and they talked with Qaddafi, and the fact that she comes from a gifted, learned, urbane, Damascene background, talking to Qaddafi, and the way that her demeanor and her speaking of Fusha Arabic and so forth sort of puts Qaddafi on the defensive, in and of itself, is a documentary that I hope Jihan makes. So yes, it is political, but political simply, Lisa, by virtue of the fact that Jihan gives us a space for us to sort of retrieve from the banality that we see on our daily life and sit and watch and learn and restore the way we should ordinarily think about when we hear Libya. Because the caricature that Libya and right now Iran, are you for government or anti-government? Are you for Qaddafi or anti-Qaddafi? It just doesn't add up. This is not the way people work. The complexity and humanity and multidimensionality of human experience is such that Jihan's mom can sit down and tell you stories about her youth when she's still very young and attractive, but that's a different story. In Harlem, she was opening a school teaching Arabic to the Arab community here in New York. It's not just one thing, it are varieties of things that come out. So yes, it is political, but not in the sense that tomorrow morning you get up and read in the blasted New York Times. Is political as it should be political, namely humanity of all of us are reflected in the documentary.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor for questions momentarily, but I'd actually like you to reflect a little bit on what you've learned about yourself or about identity, your own or your families and so forth, in the course of making as Jihan was making the film. How did you reflect on your own history or on your art?
I think I didn't know that she was doing a film. She didn't even mention. She is so independent and quiet and low-key, and she wants everything on her own. But she was very proud, I felt, and very attached to me. She asked so many questions, and to me, since she was, okay, sometimes I tell her, it's okay, it's enough talking about, this and that. But she always absorbed everything I said. And she, of course, missed her father. And the way, after she was like since she was 6 years, till she started to make the film, I never lied about her father. Where is he? Who? Why? I said the truth. This is the key in life. Say the truth, but nicely. She is little girl, and even when she was teenagers and more, I used to be very tender, but the truth, always. What do you believe, this and that? So I think I gave her strength, and I knew that she was, while I was in the breakfast table, I see her telephone. And I make believe I didn't want to embarrass her, but I knew that she was recording me all the time. So God bless her, she did really, really, really well. And everything I saw in the film, still as if it was yesterday. Nothing not right, not good, not real. It was everything real. And excuse me, when I mentioned Katie, because she was with us living in Paris, and she knows about these small details about my life, about Gigi, so that's it. Anything else?
That's fine. Thank you very much. I did say I was going to open the floor for questions, and I am now doing that. Sir. There's a microphone coming.
Okay. I was wondering if you could comment on the juxtaposition of the celebration, in quotes, for your dad's funeral, and then, you twice show the conditions of the grave at this time.
That's a very good question. That's just the reality, as my mom said. It was more for us to observe. I didn't make that up, that after, so that was 2019, he was buried 2012, so that was after 7 years. That's the damage of the Civil War. And although he was that loved, and there was a genuine attempt to honor him, both formally in the government and with our family in Benghazi and the community there, his hometown, the circumstances, the conditions of the country are so overbearing that they didn't have the resources to even have, because there was landmines also around that area. So it was just a symbol to show Even if we wanted to honor, there wasn't really the means. And it is tragic, actually. And it says a lot about the huge build-up in the film about who he was and what he meant to people. But if we can't even preserve that, it's a nice barometer to show you the desperate state that Libya is in.
On the other hand, the film itself is that and will, transcend generations and so forth. So, well worth. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay. There was a reference in the film to how, after your father was kidnapped, he was transported to Libya from Cairo. Has anything been discovered yet about the role of the Mubarak regime in collaborating with operatives of Gaddafi's regime, if that's what happened, to cause that to happen?
I personally don't know of any more information that's been unveiled from the Egyptian side, but it was a pattern. He wasn't the only case. There was actually quite a few international assassinations and kidnappings around the world, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with Hisham, who is also a Libyan, who has a book called The Return about his father. And his father was also kidnapped in Cairo in 1990. Mine was kidnapped in 1993. I think my mother potentially could answer that question better. If there's been any new information about Egypt's role in handing him to Qaddafi. Their role, like what they did. Egypt.
Can we say something?
You don't have to if you don't want to say.
No. Because it was really, for my experience with the Egyptian, not the people. I love Egyptian people, but politics, starting with President Mubarak. And the thing I know about from before he was kidnapped, I know about Egypt and Mubarak and this and that. So when I went, after the ambassador of Egypt came to visit me in Paris, nobody invited him. He just came. And he told me, Siyatik, it means Your Excellency. We didn't do it. I said, what are you talking about? Let me ask you, where Mansur was kidnapped, from where? What land? He said, I said, okay, no more questions. So the Egyptians from day number one, they didn't admit that he was kidnapped from Cairo. And Mansur, he used to call me every day, as usual, when he traveled. I'm here, I'm in Funduk Safir, and this and that. He tells me details. So then he disappear. So they're guilty from day number one. Then I start researching about all this with the media, without telling names now. Yes, they know. In fact, they helped the kidnappers who they came to Egypt to trick Mansur by giving him something to drink, tea, and they took him to over with the borders from Alexandria to Libya. So they were guilty. It makes sense. I was at that time still living in Paris. So also the French, they knew, and they wanted me to stay. So they start giving me some delicate information about the Egyptian, what they did with Mansur. Mansur was very lucky. He has so many people loves him from Europe, from Germany, from England, from everywhere, with respect. So they used to give me the news. So then the president of Egypt, he said, you are invited to come to Egypt. I said, of course, I will. Why not? I will go to the people, to the land where he was kidnapped from. And I went to Egypt. Then I felt more how they were acting, the body language. Everybody knows about body language. The way they were guilty from day number one. Why people who has the right, they're stronger? Because they have the right. Automatically you are strong. So the way you sit, the way you talk, you have an issue. And the guilty people, they become very scared, even if they are in the big positions. The only thing I have to mention, when I was in Cairo, in the airport, I was surrounded with guards. So I said, why all these guards? It should be to protect Mansur, not me. I'm only a mother and a painter. I have nothing to do. I don't need that. So this is another way to prove that they were guilty. And then Mr. Mubarak, God bless his soul, he sent a message for me to visit him. I refused, but nicely. No, thank you. I don't want to visit Mubarak. Then I was in a hotel surrounded with guards. They thought that they will scare me, but I did scared them by asking the American embassy before I came to Egypt. So the ambassador of the American embassy, don't worry, Mrs. Kikhia, we're here. So I surrounded myself with safety. At the same time, I was strong to say the truth about my feelings. I don't want to say, you didn't do, yes, they did. And he was the victim of their lies. And they took a lot of money. I don't know how much, but they took.
Lisa, can I add something?
Thank you.
The question about Hosni Mubarak and Gaddafi and such, I think that Jihan's film is also about Gaddafi, is about the pathology of power. These pathological figures like Hosni Mubarak, like Hafiz al-Assad, like, all of them, like Muammar Qaddafi, pathology of power. Latin Americans have a genre of dictator novel, so they put it on the stage. Autumn of the Patriarch and so forth. So in a way, Jihan's film is one way of, the title of the film is My Father and Qaddafi, is also about Gaddafi. And it has a lesson for us. Right now, we have a person with a pathology of power ruling over us. So in English, in American novel, American literature, we don't have a dictatorship novel the way the Latin Americans have and Marquez has and so forth. So different cultures that have dealt with the Shah, Muammar Qaddafi, etc., namely those in horrible position of power and corrupted, have different ways of dealing with how do you manifest it, how do you put it on a stage.
Yeah, several thoughts occur to me, one of which is that Libyan fiction is very what I would describe as magical realist, in somewhat of the same kind of. The other thing is that Mubarak kept the Libya file for himself. His foreign minister did not do Libya. He did Libya, for what that's worth. So that's where the buck stopped, always stopped, right here. Right. First you and then the person in front of you. Sure. Either way.
Hi. Well, first of all, again, Thank you so much to both of you for being here and sharing your story with us and doing it in this generous way. I wanted to ask about the interviews because I'm writing my thesis. I'm a human rights MA student, and I'm writing my thesis on oral history as a pedagogy of resistance. So I'm really interested in like the oral history part, and I wanted to ask how it was to get the interviews, to get the people to consent, and how it was for you listening to them talk about your father and what they shared also about Libya. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I interviewed over 60 people. When I first started the film, there was nobody I would turn down. There was no such thing as something that was unimportant or that I could already predict I didn't need. That was probably more driven emotionally because, like I had said in the film, I don't remember my father. So that was that's an endless void there. But at the same time, I would say that I had somehow naturally a journalistic approach. Like I said earlier, I have a certain emotional distance. And for me, I approach the film from a place of understanding. I wanted to understand, not judge. I want the truth, not to judge. So I had to be impartial and really open. And there are customs to follow. So, as a woman, there's almost a gentleness that you have to come in and approach. But I was also very direct and very honest. I didn't trick anybody. I said, I just want to learn more about my father, about Libya, about anything. And eventually, a lot of conversations would would continue for hours because I became genuinely interested in them. Because, like I said, tracing my father's life is tracing a century of Libyan history. So there's a good 30 years before Qaddafi came into power, almost 40 years. But I'm almost 40. That's like, just because somebody comes into power now in my life, I erase the first 40 years don't matter. That doesn't make sense. So I had this deep curiosity. But the distance was also, again, like I said, from a place of understanding and not judging. And I always had in the back of my mind that no matter how charming, how kind, how paternal someone was towards me, not because I had anything against that person personally, just out of probability, there's a chance that that person was maybe responsible or knew. So the distance helped a lot, and naturally had a bit of a historical kind of... So anyway, the point is I came in to gather information. The emotional stakes were so high that I actually had to act very neutral. You see, I'm not coming in for vengeance. I'm not going to judge anybody, not even Qaddafi's lawyer. I asked him genuine questions. What was it like? And what do you think happened? I'm not wagging my finger at him and blaming him because his information is more valuable than my judgment. And I may not know what to do with it. It may not fit in the film. I may not be able to process it in my life, but at least I've gathered it. And with time, or maybe never, I'll know what to do with that information, but at least I got it. Because, again, the stakes are so high for Libya that I don't really know a lot of other people who had done this kind of work to have the insanity to follow that many people and end up in their living rooms and to talk about life. And I would ask, what did it smell like? What did Libya look like? What was it like running in the streets? Tell me the moment that, I want to picture it. And one thing I'll also say is that I invested a lot in the historical archives because I knew there's very little content coming out of Libya, especially that's personal. And so I'm not going to do any shortcuts, no reenactments, and budget's not going to get in the way of historical archives, even though the irony is I had to pay over $100,000 for historical archives from European archive houses, Italian, French, British. The most expensive was the French, and they were actually $17,000. I'm only saying this just to show you of footage of my father's face. So I even asked for a discount because I was like, well, it's just him in the frame. And it's my father. Can we do 17,000's a lot on an independent filmmaker? And I'm not going to give up because I've had everyone telling me just replace it. And I'm like, that's not an option. This in my country's history is on the line in my perspective, from my perspective. So yeah, it's a combination of the drive came from a really strong intuition. I have to do this. I have to tell the story. I'm open to whatever unfolds, but at the same time keeping a journalistic distance and pick one principle. What do you want to do? Understand, judge, make it. Then pick one, and then that'll help you like unfold. Sorry, that's it.
Right here.
Can I hold it now? Okay. Thank you so much. This is really a really special evening, and thank you for sharing your story. I'm just curious about the relationship that you had with Qaddafi and how that unfolded. So you mentioned in the film that he invited you for summers. Obviously, you met with him. What was that like, and how did you navigate that relationship? Because obviously, it's very challenging to accept perhaps that invitation and how you'd feel about that. I'd just love to know more about that relationship you had with him. Thank you.
Qaddafi is so powerful that he's in my thoughts, he's in my dreams. He's almost like, operates like a demigod. He had a puppeteering hand in my life. And he's omnipresent. And he was also a source of one of my most irrational thoughts in my life, which was that he was never going to die. I didn't picture it. So that's to show you the grip of tyranny. It's so deep, it affects your rational mind. It's deeply disorienting, constantly. And that surreal feeling, it's like my father was kidnapped, and it's doubled down by the fact that it was done by this hand of God. And the precision to just extract a man from a family and move him. So for me as a child, I was very deep in thinking in that, what does it mean to disappear? Because you can't decide. I used to feel very guilty at school. I have some of my childhood friends here. They've known me since I was like 11 years old. But you know, you're children and you end up talking about your parents. And I feel horrible when I said he died. Because imagine if I was 6, that means 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, it's many, many years of school. I would say, I'm not allowed to say that I can't. That's not up to me. Just because he's not with me doesn't mean he's not alive. So Qaddafi had a hand in all of that. And there was the prime minister of Libya who said in my film, he said it off, it didn't make it to the film, to the cut, but he said, the ghost of Qaddafi is still ruling us. You know, these are very, 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 very powerful people. And one of my producers also very insightfully said that dictators, you know, they reach this extreme level of power where they kill our fathers and replace them. So in a way, Qaddafi's our father. Not a good one, but it's deeply hypnotic. And as you find yourself kind of in a loop of a surreal state, escaping from them, but also Stockholm. There's other films and reflections on Qaddafi and on other dictators, and you will see very strong threads of Stockholm syndrome, wishing for time before, and then we forget that they were the original cause of all that anyway. But.
Yeah, two comments on Gaddafi, if I may. When I was doing my own research, and this was obviously decades and decades ago, my colleagues and fellow researchers in Libya asked whether I wanted to meet Gaddafi. And I thought, well, you know, that might be interesting. And they said, if you do, we won't be able to work with you anymore. So I didn't. But I also think it's a reflection of how powerful he had become, that people had to go and see the body, that display was necessary for people to say he's really dead, because people didn't think he would ever die. So I think the demise of a dictator tells you a lot about what they meant and how people treat the dictator's body, if you will. Anyway, a couple more questions right here.
And while you're going, I actually never thought Qaddafi would die, and I also was the only one that was extremely skeptical in my family that was actually my father's body. So the surreal feeling goes in both directions. You don't know what to believe.
Thank you for being here. I'm from Colombia, and we suffer the effects of civil war, big civil war, and we have victims of kidnapping and abductions and disappearing people. And I wanted to ask you about this healing process that a film or this kind of artistic, journalistic, documentary products can bring to a society that it's completely broken. In particular, because with this story, it's your story, it's your family. But I think that as a filmmaker, as an artist, your artwork is not yours anymore, because I can feel a lot of empathy, and I'm very sure that in my country there are people that could be very connected with these kind of stories and feel that could be ours too. So first, thank you for bringing this, and yes, how do you think that film could heal these societies that suffer war?
Well, thank you. I always hesitate to speak for other people's experience. All I can do is say that I had the privilege. I mean, I didn't invent trauma or kidnapping or death. That's part of the human experience. But I would say there's an incredible amount of privilege. I think there's people in life that are going through so much and so traumatized, and they're under so much pounding pressure that they can't even come up for air. First of all, to survive their conditions, let alone to come up for air to reflect, let alone to reflect and then have a craft to talk about it. So the level of privilege and luxury it is to be here, I've always been very aware of it. But I do want to say that my film also shares joy. I mean, I think that my mother made the genius move and intuition, mother's instinct, to invest in me and my siblings' joy. That was real. We were allowed to be happy. There was no need to punish us further. And these things were not explicitly said to us. We just lived it. And at the same time, she would put on her power suits, and we literally watched her search for my father. But that separation, that clean separation where she didn't punish the children and allowed us to live our life fully was brilliant, because it ended up taking 19 years anyway. I was 6 years old when he disappeared. I was 25 when his body was found. At least I lived a joyful life where I still love people. And I do think that's a stronger place to fight for life anyway. You know, so if you do have a political act or something you feel so compelled, it's overwhelming, that you want to fight for in life. But we're fighting for it so that we can be joyful, right? We don't want to be miserable on the other side. So, I mean, I don't know what it would be like for anyone else. All I can say is I shared my childhood story with the world, and I still do believe in a joyful, in spreading joy as well.
You know, I have to say that's such a perfect way to stop. I think we will. So I know there are more people who want to ask questions and so forth, and maybe you can do that informally a little bit, or go to the other screenings. There are other opportunities in New York now. But I just want to thank you both very much, and all of you for joining us. Thank you.